It is March, which means it is Endometriosis Awareness Month. You might be thinking, what the hell is that? Well, today I am here to tell you what I know about it and my experience living with it. Endometriosis is an inflammatory, chronic, and invisible illness. It is when the endometrial tissue that actually sheds itself out when you have your period is appearing outside of the uterus. And because it thinks that it's part of the endometrial tissue, it tries to shed itself out with the actual tissue when you have your period, which causes heavy bleeding, pain, and other really bad symptoms. One of the most interesting things about endometriosis is how common yet unknown, underdiagnosed, and under-researched it is. 1 out of 10 women have endometriosis, and it usually takes 7 to 10 years for a woman to get diagnosed with endometriosis. Mine took 2 months. It all started in the winter of 2024, the bloody winter. I have had terrible pain and bleeding throughout my periods, my whole life. But when I asked doctors or my family about it, they just said sometimes some women bleed more, sometimes some periods are more painful, and that's normal. But what they don't tell you is period pain is not supposed to be debilitating. You need to be still able to function as a human being out in the social life, out in the education life, out in the work life. And I thought that what I was going through was normal. I was just a bit unluckier. In November, I woke up with a very, very heavy pain. I had class that day and I was not gonna go. Luckily, my teachers did not care that much about attendance, so I technically did not need a doctor's report. But I was a bit worried about why I was in so much pain to the point of not being able to get out of bed, but actually rolling myself to the floor, falling down, trying to fall down on my knees so I could stand up easier to be able to go to the hospital, which was right next to my dorm, thankfully. I was in the ER and the doctor gave me a painkiller and told me to drink more water. To this day, after 2 years, I don't see his point, but I had the doubts, so I ended up going to the gynecologist anyways after my period, and I asked them if it was normal for me to have so much period pain. I gave them an ultrasound and they told me that my uterus was healthy, which is a wild take knowing what's coming next. So a month passes and the period demons are back at it again. And spoiler alert, it's my last period ever to this day. I was working as a waitress at the time and I had a shift. But before my shift, I remember not being able to walk on the street without feeling huge chunks of blood every step I take. And I remember having to layer up 3 pads. Still, I showed up to the shift. Luckily, my bosses were really nice. I remember sitting down on the floor, asking for 5 minutes, crouching down, trying to fight the pain because I could not stand up properly. And they told me to go home because obviously I was not going to be able to work. After that, my university gave its winter break and I was finally able to go back to my family's house in another city. In a very stressful and horrifying time in my life, I started bleeding. And I have had very systematic, on-time periods my whole life. So because I was really stressful, I thought maybe it just came early this time. 5 days passed. I was still bleeding as much as the first day, and then another 5 days passed. And on the 10th day, I was still bleeding. And I was like, okay, I'm probably dying. So I ended up in the ER. They checked for a urine test first and it came clear. So there was no infection or anything. And then they laid me down. They were pressing against my pelvis to see if I was in pain. But I was already in pain without them pressing. So of course it was hurting. And they said, you're young, it's probably a cyst. You should go to a gynecologist. Again. So I ended up going to a gynecologist, and it took my doctor 5 seconds of an ultrasound to see that there was a cyst indeed. So he asked for an MR. At this point of the story, it gets really fucked up because it took them a week to send back my MR report, and at that point my spring semester was actually starting, so I went back to the city that I was studying in. Huge mistake. But I was in so much pain that I was just craving to go back to my old normal life. 2 days before the spring semester started, I received a phone call from a family member. She sounded quite calm on the phone, and to this day I don't know how she managed, but she had received my MR report. And she told me on the phone, I'm gonna send the picture of it to you. You need to get it printed out and go to the nearest emergency room as soon as possible. So I was given these instructions and I was like, okay. So I hung up the phone, I checked my messages, and I don't know if you've ever seen an MR report, but the problematic parts are written in bold. More than half of my report was written in bold. And of course I was curious, so I read a lot of very interesting details about my cysts, plural. I read about their sizes, structures, and at the end of that huge paragraph, I saw that they diagnosed the looks of it with, in Turkish, cyst adenocarcinoma. And next to it, it wrote malignant. I read it and I said, oh fuck, I have cancer. I think I laughed and cried at the same time for 5 or 15 minutes, but I remember calling up a close friend and saying, I really need to go to the emergency room. Can you come with me? I did not cry on the way. I was in shock, I think. I went to the emergency room again. And I think I fought with a doctor for the first time in my life there, because he asked me for a urine test and an ultrasound. And I was really freaking out. I had to get my blood checked for tumor markers as soon as possible. So I was not really understanding why they were trying to start things from the very bottom. So I asked exactly that. And I vividly remember the female student next to him leaning down and whispering, shouldn't we ask for tumor markers? Yes, you fucking should. That's what I came for. And the male doctor was like, I had to go back to my hometown again because I realized I could not do it alone. I could not deal with this alone. And it's fine to be honest to yourself about it. Some struggles are just too scary or big or sudden to go through alone. So I went to the gynecologist again with my family this time, and I remember the face of my doctor, who was around the same age as me and had the same name as me. The shock in her eyes and how she looked at me, how she raised her head when I said my MR report says I have cancer. She immediately checked my ultrasound right there, and she saw the exact things that the MR report saw. However, the cysts had grown 1 or 2 centimeters in a week. That was also giving tumor, because why the fuck are you growing so fast? What's the rush? So she checked with her professors, and I was asked for a lot of blood tests. I think my life at that point was fighting through the pain with a painkiller that I was prescribed, that was apparently prescribed to patients who had got out of surgery and lost a limb. That's how much pain I was in. And I was supposed to use it once or twice a day, but I think I was taking it 6 times because the pain was that bad. I think the worst part of this, looking back, is that I'm never really able to explain how much pain I was in to anyone. And after my tumor markers came back, I saw that I was indeed very much above the standard references for all of my tumor markers. I think my CA125 tumor marker, I think the reference was 0 to 40 or something. I will check. And what came back was, for me, 250 something. I was looking pretty cancerous. I felt pain when I saw my family members, because I think we were all scared that I was kind of gonna die. I remember crying because my aunt brought me food. I was like, because she thinks I'm gonna die. Dude, I mean, I cannot really blame myself. It's a very horrible thing to go through psychologically. And the next time I went to a checkup, which I was, by the way, the only young person there in the gynecological oncology, because all of them cancer women, they are past their menopause. And I kind of felt popular. I was kind of like a celebrity around the gynecology department of that hospital. And I was joking around like, oh yeah, they're gonna write articles about me. I'm like the next best thing in medicine. After they saw my tumor markers, they invited me to the council. There's a cancer council that I did not know about, by the way, until it happened to me. And what happens is it's just a bunch of doctors sitting around, maybe with their students, also listening in, and they just check to see if you're cancer or not by discussing it. I was the first person to be called in because, again, I was kind of a big deal because of my age and what was happening to me. And the head of the cancer council was a famous doctor that my friends who were studying medicine knew about. I remember him, another doctor, and like 20 students in the room just looking at me. And the professor had my MR report in his hands, had my blood tests in his hands, and he just did this. Endometriosis. After 2 months of bleeding out, taking very heavy painkillers, or dealing with really heavy pain if you don't, and all that sadness and what the fuck is going on with my life feeling, just being reduced to that moment of hearing endometriosis. How'd you figure that out? But he was right. When I heard the name of it the first time, it rang a bell because I was Googling my symptoms. I mean, everyone does it. And I saw endometriosis on the list. But when I read the symptoms of endometriosis, I saw that like half of it I did not go through. So because the symptoms didn't really match, I was like, well, it's not whatever this is. And when I heard it from the doctor's mouth, I was like, oh, it's that. But I probably don't have that. So then I was sent to an ultrasound again. This time with 20 of students getting a live lesson from my ultrasound, which again, it's nice to help science and education, question mark. I was really fucking embarrassed. And I remember the professor pointing out some stuff in the ultrasound screen and just saying, cysts on both ovaries, endometriosis. Look, this part is swollen, endometriosis. He kept pointing out some weird shit and explaining them as symptoms as to how I have endometriosis. But of course, it's not that easy to get a diagnosis. They asked me for another very specific blood test that specifically checks if you have endometriosis or cancer. Literally it. Of course, no hospitals have it. It's a very specific test. You have to go to a laboratory. And I got it done. After a few days, I found out that I, in fact, had endometriosis and not cancer. Apparently, endometriosis also causes your tumor markers to go up a bit. It's a very ruthless disease, I shall say. So I was finally diagnosed with endometriosis, and I did not know what the fuck was gonna happen. I was begging for a surgery. Just cut me open and take whatever is creating this misery so I can be free. Just like that. They don't perform surgery if you're young and single, because there's this risk of infertility. But that risk of infertility also comes with being an endometriosis patient. Most women who get diagnosed with endometriosis actually go to the doctor because they are unable to get pregnant. Most infertile women have endometriosis, which was also a question I had in my mind and asked the famous professor about. Am I infertile? And he said, I need to see your husband. I think mine was a very proper fear, but then again, women's reproductive health, not taken seriously. I don't have a husband, by the way, as far as I know. Because they could not do surgery, they prescribed me a tiny white pill, which actually kind of saved my life. This beauty, filled with 2 milligrams of progesterone, actually saved me. In a matter of 3 months, my cysts were completely gone. And so was the pain. And I mean, all the pain, because I stopped having periods. It's a blessing and a curse because Well, if I don't get periods, there is not a chance that I will have cysts again, because cysts related to endometriosis are by the public known as chocolate cysts, and they are caused when the extra lining outside of your uterus cannot empty all of the blood while you're on your period, which causes small blood-filled cysts to form, which are brown colored in screenings, apparently. Hence the name chocolate cyst. I find that very funny and unfunny at the same time, a bit off-putting. So the story of my diagnosis is a very painful, bloody, heavily medicated, and a fearful one, because I did get misdiagnosed with cancer at some point. Well, it was just an MR report, but still, the fear was very, very valid. But the funny thing with endometriosis is that also a lot of women experience it really differently. A lot of women who got their diagnosis or haven't gotten them yet but are struggling through endometriosis, they have very different stories compared to mine and to each other's. And when you're fighting with something that comes out of nowhere, that is so debilitating, and you cannot make sense of why it happened to you because nobody knows why it happens, you seek some kind of a belonging, this feeling of being understood. And that is why when I found out that I had endometriosis, one of the first things that I did was go online and look for a community, which is why I think it's really important to talk about these matters. If we don't talk about what we're going through and how we're dealing with it, or how we cannot deal with it, then young women like me at 21, or any other teenager who is wondering why they are in so much pain when they have their periods, or women who cannot get pregnant, or women who are still fighting to get a diagnosis, if we don't talk, then how are we going to feel less alone? Which is why I wanted to film this video, because when I got my diagnosis, it was March, 2 years ago, and on Instagram I found this account for women with endometriosis, and one of the posts I saw said, everything I know about endometriosis, I learned from other women. And to this day, that is so true for me too, because the doctors don't talk to you. The internet is just listing symptoms and just telling you that they don't know why it happens, they don't know how to cure it, but it's very common. And that's not exactly a coverage of what an illness is. I know the symptoms, I'm living through some of them, but it is actually other women and how they deal with it that inspires me and makes me learn about myself and this illness more. That's why I think it's really important to tell our story and possibly be there for each other, even if we don't really know each other, because we might be going through very similar things or very different things, but somehow we can understand each other. Having an illness like endometriosis does not only affect you physically, of course. I think there is a lot of mental tension both in the process of getting diagnosed and after it, because while I was waiting for my diagnosis, when I was misdiagnosed with cancer, I remember being sad all the time, but it was a quiet sadness. I think the most prominent thing that I was feeling was fury. I was really angry that this was happening to me out of nowhere for no known reason. So the initial question is, why did this find me? One of the things that I realized was that this is something that I will live with throughout the rest of my life, and everyone who knows me and ends up getting to know me a little bit will know that I have endometriosis. It's now part of who I am. It's something that I will give out as a fact, like the fact that I sing or the fact that I am from Istanbul. I'm not saying this as in I owe this information to be given out, but everyone who becomes close to me will also know about this thing that I have. I also lost a lot of friends there during the process of getting diagnosed, because One of the things that I learned is that even if you're friends with someone, they're not meant to be there for you about everything in life. I felt like most of my friends did not enjoy talking to me during that time. And it wasn't because I was a mess or boring. I was never boring. I was cracking jokes left and right because I did not know how else to deal with that. But I think there was always this undergoing sadness that just could not be ignored. I had to forgive a lot of my friends for not reaching out. You get to know yourself more. You get to know your friends more. You get to know your family more. You get to know life more because you see how you act and how the people around you act in times of turmoil and uncertainty and pain. I was also called strong a lot of times because I made my way through that. But I think this is something that a lot of women with endometriosis can relate to. We know deep down that every day we survive through this illness, because even in my case, even though I am medicated and not in pain anymore, there are times when I get flare-ups and I don't know why. The pain just comes back because of something I ate or a meal I missed or because I did not sleep enough. It's like endometriosis really does not let you forget that it's there in your body. It gives you these little reminders that I'm still here. Keep me under control. So when people call me, you're so strong, you fought your way through this. Well, you think I'm fighting my way through it still. Maybe not as strongly as I had to did back then. Maybe not as fiercely, but I still am. And I don't want to be strong. I wish I never had endometriosis. I wish it never happened to me. I wish I had a very healthy body and I was really weak. I wish I wasn't strong. I wish I didn't have to be. And I know that people say it because it's a nice thing to say. It really is. But I think it's the psychology of having a chronic illness that kind of changes the way you look at these things. It changed the way I look at my body, my health. I have a fear installed in me about ever living through that pain again. And honestly, my heart goes out to all of the women out there who are fighting through an invisible illness. I understand how hard it is, and it never fully disappears. But maybe the least that we can do is talk about it, hear each other out, let some other people know about what we're going through, even if not very intimately, even if not very in a detailed way. Just letting them know that this condition exists and it's a bit unfair how they're treating it. Let's raise some awareness since it is the awareness month already. I really appreciate it if you have watched it this far. I hope I didn't bore you. I just had a story to tell and it felt like it was the time. So if you are a woman who is also dealing with an illness like this, I hope that I made you feel less alone. And if you were just curious or wanted to know more about it, thank you so much. And maybe this week you can tell one random person about endometriosis, and little by little maybe we can change something, because the more awareness it has, the more funding it will have, the more attention it will get, and maybe one day we will figure out the reason why it happens and maybe how to cure it even. Please don't hesitate to ever reach out, even if you just need someone to talk to. Don't hesitate to share your own experiences or maybe just your support. Thank you for sticking around. Now I am going to class because life does not stop, even if your uterus does.